interesting, going back and forth between the two processes, and now we're hybrid, so we're doing both. In person and virtual. Yeah. I mean, it's, I really liked and once, we all got accustomed to it, it just became so easy. I was like, yeah, there's just
Please note that while the meeting has not started, we are currently streaming and we are currently broadcasting.
Thank you. We are going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. We have a couple of folks missing today. Our mayor is on a trip to D.C. as part of a delegation to the White House. And our mayor pro tem is on a flight home. We're hoping that he will arrive before the end of the meeting. But as the third in line to the throne, who's that? Prince Archie, I believe. I'll be your Prince Archie for the day. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor O'Neill has requested an excused absence. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton is running late, as you mentioned. Councilmember Caballero.
Your mic is echoing. Are there two mics?
How's this? Better?
Still weird. Maybe try the other one.
Mute your laptop.
I did.
It's muted. That's the sound.
It's the Zoom. We think it might be the Zoom, Madam Clerk. Okay.
We're all good now.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton is running late. Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Halsey-Hyman.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
And Councilmember Williams is also running a bit
He's also
late.
running late. Yes, but we're hoping that Councilmember Williams will be here shortly, and Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, we're hoping will join us by the end. Are there any announcements by members of the council? Councilmember Freeman, did you have one?
Yes, thank you. Just a note for our reentry community that I had a chance to hear Brian Stevenson last night speaking, and he'll be speaking again tonight, I believe, with Duke University. And I just wanted to just send, just acknowledge that this time and these conversations that we do have on council, we don't want to lose sight of our reentry community and the work that's being done by folks in our community around it. And I do want to center, I do believe there's a reentry, I'm going to mess it up, a reentry simulation happening tomorrow from 1 to 6, and just want to encourage folks to get engaged, to understand how folks in our community are seeing what our services look like when they try to reenter after being justice involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other announcements from members of the council? Councilmember Hyman?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just want to acknowledge today is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. So September 21st, 2022 is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Today is used to shed awareness on one of the most struggles that Black women face in terms of racial equity in pay. So Black women have to work from January 1st, 2021 through today to equal the amount of pay that a non-Hispanic white man has made in a previous year. So I just wanted to talk about that today, that it is Black Women's Equals Pay Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a note from the clerk that we are not 100% sure if we've already given the mayor an excused absence, so we're going to vote on that again just to be sure. Can I have a motion on giving the mayor an excused absence? Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Freeman.
Second.
second by Councilmember Caballero. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you, passes 5-0. We're now going to move on to our priority items. Are there any priority items from the city manager?
Good afternoon, council members. I have a few priority items for you this afternoon. I have agenda item number 7, which is an interlocal cooperation agreement with Durham County for the Durham Cultural Roadmap Development. A motion was added to reflect the costs associated with this agreement, and City Council is being asked to suspend the rules and vote during the work session to expedite this work. Agenda item number 15, which is a Historic Preservation Fund grant project ordinance. City Council is being also asked to suspend the rules and vote during this work session to meet the September 30th, 2022 deadline to execute the agreement and to accept the grant. Agenda item number 5, interlocal agreement with Durham County for joint funding of the Low-Income Homeowners Relief Program, which is known as LIHRP. A motion has been added to reflect the costs associated with this interlocal agreement in your packet. Agenda item number 6, which is change order number 1 and amendment number 4 to the construction manager as constructor contract with Balfour Beatty Construction, LLC, for the Public Works Operations Center renovation project. Attachment number 6, PWOC site plan was added for additional information. And finally, agenda item number 14, which is a citizens matter, Tricia Smar. There is also in your packet a response from the Transportation Department, and it has been added to your agenda package. That is all I have for you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there a motion on the manager's priority items?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Thank you. That passes, whoops, the last one was 4, sorry. 4-0, this one passes 5-0. Councilmember Williams has joined us. City Attorney for priority items.
Good afternoon, members of council. Donna O'Toole sitting again for City Attorney Kim Rayberg. The City Attorney's Office does request one priority item this afternoon, and that is to hold a closed session pursuant to NC Gen Stat 143-31811A3 for attorney-client consultation considering the handling or settlement of the following case, and that's Oak Charter Academy Incorporated et al. Versus City of Durham, and the case number here in Durham Superior Court is 21 CVS 2129.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept the City Attorney's priority item?
Moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Hyman, seconded by Councilmember Williams. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Q passes unanimously 5-0. And finally, City Clerk for any priority items.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Johnson and council members. I wanted to let you know there's no priority item from the City Clerk's office today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to our administrative consent items from the City Clerk's office. Item number 1, approval of City Council minutes. From the Finance Department, item number 2, bid report, August 2022. Under departmental items from our Department of Transportation, item 3, amendment to professional services contract with Ramsey Kemp Associates for U5823 Woodcroft Parkway Extension. Under Department of Water Management, item number 4, professional engineering services contract with CDM Smith Incorporated for the Western Intake Partnership Regional Water Treatment Facility preliminary engineering project, amendment number 1. Under Finance Department, item number 5, interlocal agreement with Durham County for joint funding of the Low-Income Homeowners Relief Program. Under General Services Department, item number 6, change order 1 and amendment 4 to the construction manager as constructor contract with Balfour Beatty Construction LLC for the Public Works Operations Center renovation project. Item number 7, interlocal cooperation agreement with Durham County for Durham Cultural Roadmap Development. We've been asked to suspend the rules and vote to approve this item at this work session. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Councilmember Williams. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. Passes unanimously 5-0. Is there a motion to approve the interlocal cooperation agreement with Durham County for Durham Cultural Roadmap Development?
So move. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Williams, seconded by Councilmember Freeman. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. It's approved unanimously 5-0. Moving on with the consent agenda, under Human Resources Department, item 8, contract with Cranium Holding, Inc. for the City of Durham's Learning Management System content. Under presentations, Department of Transportation, item 9, Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Feasibility Study results. We'll of course pull that for our presentation. Under public hearings, from the City County Planning Department, item 10, zoning map change 812 North Mangum Street. Item 11, consolidated annexation item Wendell at Crescent. Item 12, consolidated annexation item 637 and 641 Conover Road. Item 13, consolidated annexation item 216 Curlew. Under Citizens Matters to be heard at 1 p.m., item 14, Tricia Smar. Under supplemental items, item 15, Historic Preservation Fund Grant Project Ordinance. We've also been asked to suspend the rules and vote on this item. Are our rules still suspended, Mr. Attorney, or should we do it again?
No, you should do it again.
Okay. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Caballero, seconded by Councilmember Hyman. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. Passes unanimously 5-0. Is there a motion to approve the Historic Preservation Fund Grant Project Ordinance?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Williams, seconded by Councilmember Hyman. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. Also passes unanimously 5-0. All right, that concludes our agenda. So we will first go to our public comments. We have one person already on the agenda and a few folks who have signed up to speak. So first we'll take our person who is on the agenda, Tricia Smar. Hi, you can come right up here to this podium and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Tricia Smar, and I'm a resident of South Durham. Last year, I lobbied for City Council to get a developer building a new neighborhood next to mine to add traffic calming measures to their new street. The developer agreed and submitted a raised crosswalk as part of their site plan, but the city's transportation folks rejected it, citing a 2015 speed hump policy and telling the developer that Durham Fire Department was opposed to speed humps. Fortunately, I have a working knowledge of traffic calming through my work in injury prevention, so I reached out to City Transportation, the Joint City-County Planning Committee, and Durham's Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission to seek some sort of road safety compromise, to no avail. I also reached out to the developer, who, interestingly enough, supports additional traffic calming measures, as long as they can be approved before they begin construction next month. I also reached out to the Durham Fire Department. While my contact agreed that speed humps can delay response times, he was enthusiastic about potential workarounds like speed cushions, which are speed tables with cutouts for fire trucks, and mini roundabouts that fire trucks could drive straight over. However, it seemed that neither the developer nor the fire department had been contacted about this raised crosswalk issue to find a creative, workable solution. This is why I implore City Council to take action. Prioritize funding traffic calming measures. The city has prioritized funding for programs addressing gun violence, which is incredibly necessary as Durham saw 795 shooting incidents in 2021. And Durham also saw more than 20,000 people involved in roadway crashes last year. With Durham's commitment to Vision Zero, shouldn't roadway safety be a priority too? The city transportation staff are using a dated policy that doesn't align with Vision Zero's pedestrian and bike-friendly values. We shouldn't require a community to be scared, get injured, or die before traffic calming infrastructure can be supported, especially when it's being paid for by a developer and not the Durham taxpayer. Policy should focus on prevention of roadway injuries and seek community input, asking residents what they want to see. I ask that City Council requires the city to review and create prevention-focused policies for implementing traffic calming. The City Transportation Office recently applied for some of the historic $5 billion in the infrastructure bill. However, they've only applied to fund the creation of a Vision Zero action plan, a consultant who will later tell the city to fund a coordinator position. We can't wait for some consultant to possibly suggest that Durham hire a Vision Zero coordinator. We need to get someone in that role now to coordinate efforts and start making real change on Durham's roads. As someone who has contacted a variety of community partners around this one road safety issue, I can tell you it should be a full-time job, and it is effective since I now have partners ready to compromise on a traffic calming strategy. I ask City Council to fund and/or advise the Transportation Department to hire a full-time Vision Zero coordinator to implement this interdisciplinary work across Durham. Otherwise, road safety and Vision Zero will fall through the cracks of bureaucracy, and someone will end up getting hurt or killed on our streets, and I pray that it's not someone that you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smar.
Thank you, Ms. Smart.
Our next speaker is Donna Frederick. Welcome, Ms. Frederick. You also have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to make this quick. I'm in support of the zero vision funding that needs to be implemented immediately. I'm in Bragtown, and I've sent council, I think, a list of our priorities in our neighborhood that are definitely faulty and very risky. We've met with transportation. They've come out. They've, reviewed the area. We really need to act upon it. And one of my caveats is you need to send someone at dusk. It gets dark early now to really review what happens when evening comes. Whole lot different than daytime. So we need a really good review on the safety, and we've outlined some of our major problems that have already been sent to council. So we're just urging that this matter really comes to the priority as previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frederick. Our next speaker is Fred Broadwell. Mr. Broadwell, welcome, and you also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Council. And Fred Broadwell. I'm president of the Old West Durham Neighborhood Association. And 3 years ago, our neighborhood did a survey of our neighbors and asked about a number of problems and issues and asked how they would prioritize them. Out of 25 issues, the #1 issue was bicycle pedestrian safety. So out of 25 issues, that was #1. Since that time, our neighborhood and our neighborhood association has been looking into this issue and working on making improvements. We've had lots of dialogue with the city. The city staff have been doing a great job, but we really need a lot more. And I totally agree with the previous two speakers that we need to do more and make this an urgent priority. We just finished a study that was funded by Duke University and that was in a partnership with Watts Hillendale Neighborhood and Bike Durham. And this is the study here that we sent to all the council members and that we've been sharing with city staff. What I would say is that this is a problem that is citywide, and what we found in our study is really the tip of the iceberg as far as things that need to change. And we need more than just Vision Zero and broad goals and comprehensive plan goals.
Recording in progress.
We need to really get specific, like this plan does, which has very specific requests for changes. So I would say that we need increased funding, we need increased staff support, and we need to review the rules and regulations on traffic calming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broadwell. Our next speaker is joining us via Zoom. Can we make Mary Molina audible, please?
Councilmember Johnson, Ms. Molina has left the queue.
Has left the queue. Okay. Can you just let us know if she comes back on?
I will.
Our next speaker online is Pamela Anderson. Is she available? She's also left the queue. Okay. Is there anyone else joining us virtually who would like to participate in public comment? You can raise your virtual hand on Zoom if you would like, if you're here for public comment. Sorry. I'm hearing that Jackie Wagstaff has raised her hand. Ms. Wagstaff, would you like to make a comment? Madam Clerk, can we make her audible?
Hello?
Ms. Wagstaff?
Hello?
Ms. Wagstaff,
Yes.
welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, council members. I would like to comment on Monday night's meeting, but I'm not gonna get into specifics. But I would like to say that there are a set of rules that this body has put in place called the Rules of Decorum. And I believe that Monday night, that there were individuals of this body that actually violated those rules of decorum that they have put in place for citizens. So just so that you know that there were a lot of people watching that meeting, there were a lot of people that weren't happy with the behavior that was displayed towards the citizens. And I understand that, you know, as elected officials, people aren't always going to agree with you about your voting record or whatever you do. But at the same time, the citizens are not the elected officials. There is a certain degree of respect that needs to be maintained among this body, irrespective to what citizens come down. And what I saw from that meeting, there wasn't a citizen that presented themselves in any sort of matter that was disrespectful at any time, contrary to what the council members were doing to the citizens. So just so that you would know that there is a abundance of concern out here in the community about the way that some council members behave Monday night at the presentation of a certain development. And that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Ms. Wagstaff. I don't see anyone else with their hand raised for public comment, and I don't see Ms. Molina or Ms. Anderson back in the queue.
Councilmember Johnson, Ms. Molina has returned.
Ms. Molina is back in the queue. Thank you. Can we make her audible, please? Ms. Molina, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Councilmember Johnson, Ms. Molina has returned.
Ms. Molina is back. Sorry.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you for
I
being here. You have 3
apologize.
minutes.
I got lost twice because I was trying to find out where the visual was for the Zoom meeting, and we're not getting it. They're troubleshooting. But I wanted to second what Ms. Wagstaff had said. I too looked up the rules of decorum after watching the meeting the other night. And it's really unfortunate when citizens are treated the way that these citizens were treated. And I would like to just ask the council to please, you know, maintain these rules for yourselves. The citizens do it, you can too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. I believe there are no further public comments, and we can move to our pulled item 9, our presentation on the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Feasibility Study results. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Council. Sean Egan, Director of Transportation for the City of Durham. I'd like to introduce our guest today. Chuck Latuka is the President and CEO of Go Triangle, and he'll be presenting on the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Feasibility Study results. Thank you,
Good afternoon, council members. I also would like to introduce Catherine Eggleston, our Chief of Development. She's going to co-present with me today and talk about the more technical issues of the report findings. And we hope that we're not repeating ourselves too much through these presentations, but we want to go ahead and give you the results of the 2-year study that went on that is still in draft to be presented and finalized with our board, perhaps at our board meeting next week for Go Triangle board meeting. The study was meant to look at the technical issues, the coordinating issues, and the engineering issues, and the operational issues in the corridor. And we have a lot to point out and talk about with folks here today. It was a good study. It was done in collaboration with our partners. The county helped pay for the study, and the city was also a partner or stakeholder in the process. You can see here a list of all the participants, the MPOs, the counties, institutional stakeholders and towns. It was a very good process, very well attended, and very well, I would have to say that the city's participation was very good and appreciated throughout the process. So you may have seen some of these slides before, and I apologize if we're repeating ourselves, but this is a slide that shows our current situation as far as traffic and population. We have the triangle, it's a population of about 2 million people, with about 1.3 million vehicles in the region. And this is what our snapshot looks like for the traffic congestion today. And it is not horrible. It's not optimal, but it certainly shows that there's room for improvement, but there's still a lot of green and yellow, which is still more free-flowing in the peak hours. And then, of course, you see the congested red sections. As time moves on, if you get down to 2050, our model that we developed for this study shows that a region will grow by about 1 million people by 2050. We'll have 2.3 million vehicles in the region, and it's going to have a very severe impact on our regional road network. And you can see here the red kind of cries out that something needs to be done. Now, things probably will be done. I'm sure there's plans for DOT to expand the roadway system. There's plans to expand our bus services in the current and draft transit plans that the counties have, and also, the commuter rail project study that we're talking about here today could also help alleviate some of this. I want to talk a little bit about job growth between now and 2020 and 2050. This is a cluster map that shows 1 dot equals 50 jobs. And what the region will add by 2050 is more than 800,000 jobs. And it shows the corridor here with the green outline. So the green outline represents 1 mile either side of the North Carolina Railroad corridor where we would implement the commuter rail. So the 50,000-foot view is on the left, and then the more targeted view for the West Durham to RTP is on the top right, and then the RTP out toward Garner and through Raleigh and Garner is on the bottom part on the right. Significant growth. If you look at the cluster map on the left, the larger view, you can see not only is it just growth in this corridor, but the other corridors that we're already talking about, 15501, 54 corridor, in that area, you see a lot of growth happening there. And up that Route 1 corridor, there's a lot of growth happening there, and DOT has some plans to develop some intercity rail up in that corridor, as well as expand the highway there. So this is the challenge, right? Getting people to work for the most part, and certainly these cluster maps show that there's quite a bit of challenges here, but also shows that the corridor that we're looking at, it will well serve the jobs that are coming. A little bit about the boardings. We have a representation here of how many people would board between Auburn on the bottom, which is the furthest east point, to West Durham, furthest west, and in between, you can see that boardings will occur all throughout the corridor. It's an interesting corridor, so it's not a typical corridor like you might find outside of Washington, D.C., or outside of New York City, either coming from Westchester County or Long Island. It's not a peak direction one way. The people will be boarding this train and taking it in both directions. It's a more complex service area to manage, but it definitely shows that that many of the station areas are going to have some significant boardings here, and it's just a representation to see. And of course, it kind of follows that job cluster map, right? So with the large cluster around Raleigh, it's a little bit more in the boardings, and it's a little bit less in the Durham and West Durham area, but still significant, because Durham is going to experience some very significant job growth here between now and 2050. So one of the things that everybody wants to know is how much would this cost, right? So we really worked hard to see what are the impacts of our inflation, what are the impacts of the things that we have to do in order to build capacity into this corridor so that Norfolk Southern can operate their trains as they plan to operate them for the next 20 years or so. Amtrak's plans, the DOT Piedmont service, we want to make sure that whatever we build can operate in there. So building out the full system, we thought at the time we started this study, we thought we were being conservative. It was about $2.1 billion, 1.8 to $2.1 billion. However, a lot has changed the last couple of years. So a lot has changed having to do with inflation. Inflation adds a lot of this extra cost, a third of this extra cost, it could be attributed to the inflation that we're experiencing lately. And of course, you know, we have to take that snapshot that on the inflation that we have today, not the inflation we think we're going to have in the year of expenditure. So, so it has an impact that is driving the cost of the project as we understand it right now. And these are year of expenditure estimates, plus some of the things that we had to do in order to ensure there was enough capacity that Norfolk Southern asked us to take a look at. And we're still looking at everything that they want us to do to see if there are alternative ways to reduce the cost. But a third of the extra cost is attributed to the things that we need to do in order to ensure there's enough capacity in the corridor so Norfolk Southern can operate their trains and also maintain the track as they plan to do it. So that is significant extra work that we thought that we didn't think we had to do. But again, we don't disagree with Norfolk Southern's conclusions, but certainly we are looking for ways to reduce the cost of what they're asking us to do. And then as we went through the corridor, and we went through this in probably a little bit more detailed way than you would have for a normal feasibility study. We really looked at the engineering challenges. There was a few that we didn't know about that we found, and that added about an extra third of the cost. And Catherine can probably get into some of those as she goes through her list of challenges in the upcoming slides. The great news here, though, is that the boardings are going to be a lot more than we anticipated. So when we started the study, we thought that it was going to be anywhere between 7,500 and 10,000 people a day. But now it's looking at, our model is showing 12,000 to 18,000 boardings a day, and it really kind of depends on the fare structure that's implemented. So the more positive or lower cost fare, obviously, it will drive more boardings. But certainly, though, it's more robust. And better than we thought, and you know, but so were the cost, right? So, but that was a very positive note. As far as constructing this, if we build the full project, the construction, depending on when we start, we're looking at anywhere between 2033 and 2035 to build out the full project. So a lot of information there and a lot of conclusions that the study has reached that I think are pertinent to making decisions on moving forward. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Eggleston right now, and she'll go through some of the challenges that we found in more detail throughout the corridor.
Thank you, Chuck. Good afternoon. So as Chuck said, one of the key items in the feasibility study was identifying what obstacles there are or what items would need to be addressed in order to move the project forward successfully. So as we've assessed the corridor, it's clear that those challenges are not equally distributed across the corridor. You'll see more bubbles here in Durham than in the rest of the corridor. We'll get into some detail on why that is, kind of the luck of the geography of this rail corridor. corridor. So there's a lot of words on this page. I won't read these all, but just running through, in central Durham, we have a few issues that are really being driven primarily by the existing freight yard that operates in East Durham. Freight trains, very long freight trains being built out of that yard cause conflicts for passenger trains being able to run on time in the model. So there's a number of items that were identified in the railroad capacity modeling study that was completed as part of this phase of feasibility. So item 1 there is additional track west of West Durham that would need to be improved, basically taking a double track past West Durham out to the next siding to be able to provide necessary capacity for freight trains coming in and out of Durham. I'm going to skip to, let's see, number 2 here, adding a second track through central Durham. We do believe that there are some feasible options for doing that, so that's a positive outcome of the study. However, there are a number of options, and we would have to have consensus on what design is preferred through downtown, whether that's what type of boarding at that station, at that existing Amtrak station, what the footprint of the tracks would be there, and how that interacts in that central area right next to where the Durham Amtrak station is today and with the bus station across the street. Third on the list here, with respect to getting into East Durham, at the East Durham station, this is a station that would be located east of Alston Avenue, in the rail corridor. To put a station there, this feasibility study has identified would require closing Plum Street. To put a station there is a priority, or has been communicated to Go Triangle as a priority of the city, of the MPO. And so to be able to move forward, it would be necessary to determine that the impacts of that closure, or the potential mitigation for that closure, would be acceptable to the neighborhood and to others who would be concerned and affected by that. So that's a key piece, that if commuter rail is to move forward in this area, that would need to be addressed. An acceptable design solution for that would need to be identified. Moving further, just a little bit further to the east at Driver Street, this is another location right adjacent to Plum Street. This is the next crossing over. In that capacity modeling study, the need for a third track through the vicinity of the freight yard was identified. To tie that third track in would trigger closure of Driver Street, and there's special track work that would need to be there that would prevent that from staying open. So there's really 2 options there. Either to avoid the closure, the railroad parties would have to accept an alternate design, which we have started talking to them about, but have not been able to run that down yet, or closure and acceptable separation or alternative would need to be identified there as well. And number 5 on here, a location for the RTP station would also need to be identified. There's 2 options under consideration for that. That's a lesser issue, but still something that would need to be decided in order for there to be certainty about the design to be able to move forward. So shifting east to the center of the corridor, we have 3 items identified here. Here, the issues are more related to coordination. The Cary Amtrak station is proposed to be modified. The town of Cary is advancing a project for a multimodal center that would move their bus station and that Amtrak station from one side of Harrison Avenue to the other. The timing of that is uncertain at this point. Timing there would need to be worked out. Agreements would need to be obtained with all the relevant parties, including the railroad parties, Amtrak, and so forth. So again, coordination issue there that would need to be worked out as the project moves forward, or in order for the project to move forward in this area. At number 7 there's a number of grade separation projects that NCDOT has planned for this area that had been committed in the state CIP. With the state's funding challenges, the timing of those being implemented is a little bit uncertain. In order to ensure the cost of those projects does not accrue to the commuter rail project. If the commuter rail project were to come first, there's some work to do for that to be figured out to avoid that. And then lastly, in this area, the Piedmont trains operate between Raleigh Union Station west through Cary through Durham and on to Charlotte. There are some capacity challenges entering Raleigh Union Station. Some either agreement or design solutions would need to be identified there to ensure all parties are satisfied with operations in this portion of the corridor. And then lastly, shifting to the east, southeast Wake County really has not a lot of complexity in terms of the engineering like the other two portions of the corridor that we just looked at. A second track would need to be added, but there's no additional infrastructure beyond that that's been identified. The primary challenge in this area is the question of whether the project would terminate in Auburn versus Clayton. Johnston County does not have a funding source identified for implementation, so that would need to be addressed in order for the Johnston County piece to be able to be implemented. So in summary here, there's a number of challenges or a number of items that would need to be overcome successfully in order to move forward. One of the primary goals of this study was to identify these, understand the risks before moving forward, given the significant costs. In the gray box here on the bottom, Chuck sort of alluded to this, the cost of the project is higher than prior studies have assumed. The cost right now is exceeding the available funding that's been, or the allocated funding that's been identified for the project in the Wake and Durham Transit Plan. Additionally, availability of federal funding through the Federal Transit Administration's New Starts program is uncertain for the project based on where it's currently scoring against the current criteria for that program. So to be able to move forward with the full project, significant additional funding would need to be identified. And that's really led us to look at the potential for phased implementation options, whether one of these portions of the corridor that we just went through could be moved forward as an initial phase while work continues on the remainder of the corridor to build out that vision for the corridor over time. We also are looking at opportunities for funding outside of the traditional Federal Transit Administration sources. This graphic is of the programs available through the bipartisan infrastructure law on the rail side. It is possible that components of the project could be packaged for their benefits, their independent benefits for safety of the corridor today, for benefits to intercity passenger or freight rail to be able to be competitive for this. Examples of those kinds of projects would be grade separation projects or safety enhancement projects, or could be double tracking projects for portions of the corridor if they would provide reliability benefits for the intercity. And then also station improvements for those existing Amtrak stations could also qualify for these types of funding sources. We have been asked to look at these opportunities, every opportunity really we're looking at. So we have begun work to identify components of the project that could be positioned for these as these grant opportunities come open. There are a couple that are open right now. Rail Crossing Elimination Program is open now. Also, Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Program is open now. And we are working with the county to look at an application to support the county's potential application for a rail crossing elimination program grant to address or to study some of what we looked at earlier. Ellen Beckman is here from Durham County to speak to that briefly, and then we will wrap up either now or we will wrap up the presentation after she speaks on that.
Thanks, Catherine. Ellen Beckman, Durham County Transportation Manager. Thanks for having me here. So the Board of Commissioners, received the same presentation on September 6th, and there were a couple of key themes from that reaction. One was the desire for Durham to be a part of the project and to work towards identifying how to overcome some of these significant challenges. And then secondly, to aggressively go after federal and state funding to eliminate some of the cost and reduce the cost of the project. So, based on that direction, the county is willing to pursue and sponsor a federal grant application to study Plum Street, Driver Street, and Ellis, the Ellis West intersection. So this would be a cooperative planning study with the county, city, Go Triangle, NCDOT. It is planning, community engagement, looking at the solutions, the mitigation for those options that might be necessary. So first and foremost, the purpose of studying these 3 crossings is to improve safety. There have been, over the past 25 years, there's been 19 crashes with 3 fatalities and 9 injuries at these crossings. Also to improve connectivity. These are some of the lowest quality crossings in Durham for bike and ped facilities. The city's adopted Move Durham plan analyzed these, and these were some of the worst in terms of their current condition. And then also reliable access. There's no grade-separated crossings currently today between Alston and TW Alexander, other than 885. So most of East Durham does not have grade-separated crossings. So that affects emergency response, safe routing for school buses, and of course, like traffic delay. So it's a planning study. The purpose would be to position a construction project to compete well for state or federal TIP or other federal grant funding for implementation. And there's a few critical elements for success. Of course, I think community engagement. The county is committed to doing a robust, equitable engagement process. We've partnered with your staff extensively on that for the transit plan and would follow a similar framework. Also, this is complex and it involves a lot of governments, and we need everyone to be on board and coordinated on this. And the city is a critical partner. Plum and Driver Street are city streets, and it will be ultimately a decision of the city on what to do with those streets. So Durham County will be asking the city for a letter of support for this grant application. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Eggleston, did you want to continue the presentation, or?
We have just one more slide on next steps.
Thank you. So where are we now and what do we need to do? So we need to go out, I think, and take the full study out that we have completed and bring that out for a comment period. And we'd like to do that here pretty soon. Now we're getting into the holidays here, and we still need to design a public comment process that's acceptable to the county. So I think that would probably happen beginning in January, and put it out there for public comment for about 45 days. We need to take a look at our financial plans and our grant strategies. You just heard one part of a grant strategy is in order to get the project built, the full project over time in a phased way. And I think eliminating those grade crossings or at-grade crossings would be a significant help in order to realize the entire project over time. That's also positioning the Durham to go ahead and take advantage of some of that bipartisan infrastructure law money that's out there right now that it seems to be in abundance. And I think the money that we're looking at taking is 80-20 grant money, right? So it's not a 50-50 like we were talking about for the CIG project and for the commuter rail. So 80-20 is pretty good money to get if you can get it. And I think having these studies done in order to position Durham to eliminate these grade crossings will be really good. Then we need to decide how to go forward over the next couple of months. I think there's been a lot of conversation already happening. I've heard comments from the commissioners in Durham and also in Wake. We've heard from Mayor Raleigh in her role as on Campo board. We presented in front of DCHC, and we've heard some comments there. I think that obviously the council needs to weigh in at some point here, help us decide how do we take this, how do we approach this project in a phased approach that everybody can agree on, that we can get a regional benefit for passenger rail. So that's all we have to present today. We're happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. I see our Mayor Pro Tem has arrived. Thank you, airlines, for delivering you not super late. Would you like to take over presiding, or would you rather I continue?
Actually, Councilmember Johnson, let me just first say good afternoon to everyone in the chamber and watching at home and streaming, and to my honorable colleagues. On behalf of the mayor and the council and the city, I want to thank our senior member, Councilmember Johnson, and our immediate past Mayor Pro Tem, who set the bar pretty high for this job, for making sure that the store was minded and the ship runs smoothly. It's a bit of a comforting nostalgia to see you running the meeting again. It's a reminder to all of us that we're in good hands and that we've got capable folk here. And I'm going to ask you to keep it going and then take us to close and land it. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Do we have any questions from members of the council for our presenters? Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember. Good afternoon to all of you. This was a much anticipated presentation, although highlights and headlines from it have already been floating around in our public square. Under next steps, I was struck, well, not struck, but I took note of decide whether or how to go forward. Would you give us a sense of the TikTok? Just nail that down for us a little bit. How long does this council have, or do you think we should take to come up with a firm decision? I'm giving you permission to be presumptuous, so please speak freely.
Thank you. So I appreciate that, Mayor Pro Tem. So, you know, I think folks should take as much time as they need, right? So this is a big decision, it's a big dollar. We've had some experiences in the past where, you know, maybe we needed to take longer to talk about things. And, you know, I don't think it's a rush, but certainly though, you know, I think in anticipating the growth and showing you perhaps how long a project would take. The delivery of a project, if it's a shorter project, could take 8 years to 9 years. If it's a larger project, could take 10 years or maybe a little bit more than 10 years. So, you know, the sooner we make decisions, the sooner we can start the work to deliver the benefit of a future project. So I think that's pretty much where we're at. We want to make sure also that we are positioned to, you know, take advantage of some of these federal programs that are out there right now too. So I think the sooner that we make decisions as a region, and it's not easy to make decisions as a region, right? I mean, it might be easy for the council by itself, make a decision about the city, but when you're acting as a region, everything's a little bit more complex and difficult, and certainly, you know, there's not one force guiding that decision, right? It's a collaborative approach. So we need to make sure that we can get a conversation going, coordinate the conversations between the counties and the stakeholders and the city entities and have a certain level of comfort at what we're going to build, and also have comfort in the fact that if we do build a phase, we're not going to stop at that phase, that we're going to build out the entire project, that there's going to be many phases. So when one phase starts, planning for the next phase will also start. And I think folks need to have confidence that that's going to happen. So we want to make sure that if we do build a phase approach, that if the phase happens to be, you know, Raleigh to Ellis Road, that Durham is going to be in the phase 2. If it's going to be Durham to RTP, then people in Raleigh are going to know that they're in the next phase. So this is the conversation that has to happen as an example. I think that now that we have this information, that conversation can start. Before, everything was just theoretical, right? So how much would it cost? We didn't know. How many people would it carry? We weren't sure. But we do know now how much it's going to cost, how many people we can carry, and we also know how the region is growing, and that's a big thing here. We didn't show you the cluster map for the where people's homes are going to be, but it is significantly, and they're much more spread out than the jobs. The jobs are very clustered. But I think the benefit here that we can receive as a region, the faster we get going, the faster we get the benefit.
So, I mean, in principle, I am 100% committed to Durham remaining in the vanguard of driving the economic vitality of our region. I think that's one of our claims to fame, that this area is, if not definitely, obviously, one of the chief economic drivers of our state. I think that's appropriate. I want to remain. But I understand that, in relation to light rail, the particular footprint of this commuter rail is different from light rail in that it will parrot or mirror a lot of what we already have in place, the railroad structure. With that said, can you, since you've talked about other phases and down the road and kind of visioning next phases, how likely do you think some government agency will have to employ eminent domain to get this done, particularly in phases beyond this first iteration? And that, if that's too speculative, fine, but since you talked about other phases.
So we are, I have to say, we are so fortunate to have this rail corridor here, that this rail corridor, this historic rail corridor runs through the region, and it happens to connect all the urban areas in the region. And not only that, but it also seems to be in the right place for all of the activity centers, the jobs that we have now, the jobs we're going to have in the future. It's going to also be very close to a lot of the housing that's being planned. So I think that, as far as what else do we need, it's a 200-foot wide corridor. Now, I know when you get into the city of Durham, that 200 feet is really occupied by sidewalks and streets and things like that. But we have, one of the things we especially looked at, is the physical impacts of this project that might have on Durham. So I think we showed you renderings last time we were here that really showed that that we weren't going to have high walls or physical barriers, that we can get through Durham, deliver the extra track that we need, and also take care of some of the low bridges that plague some of the truck traffic trying to get through Durham, and without a lot of physical impact. Now, as far as eminent domain stations, obviously they're adjacent to the rail corridor, so the tracks that we need aren't really going to be a problem. It's those stations and maybe some of those at-grade crossings that Ellen just talked about here, that we have to, but we need to take a closer look and see what the impacts on those crossings are. Obviously, when you go up and over something, right now it's a single track, but we anticipate more tracks to be in there, so it's going to be a little bit more up and over than you would need today under the current situation. There may be some property that may need to be bought or acquired somehow. I don't know if there would be a willing seller or it'd be an eminent domain situation. But certainly I've toured some of these areas, and I think there is room for these grade crossings. And certainly, I got to tell you, I don't think any railroad that runs through here, Amtrak, the Piedmont folks, NS or CSX, whoever runs through here, they would appreciate these new grade crossings, because railroads are all about safety, right? And we want to make sure that we have as safe a corridor as possible. But I don't really see a huge amount of other property other than the station areas. And one of the things is when you do, and I'm just going to keep going on for a little bit here, I apologize, my staff will tell me that I talk too much sometimes, but when you do a grade crossing or build a station, there's opportunity for coming up with a development plan around that station. And that really provides us a whole new challenge, right? How do we plan for development? When you put a station there, there's development going to come around that station. So I think it's a, potential for housing, especially maybe around Ellis Road, where there's some public property that the Go Triangle owns, or other areas. I think that's also involved in situating the stations. So I think it's more than just the rail project itself. I think there's a whole planning effort needs to go around these stations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm going to yield back to Chair Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Other questions from council members? Councilmember Hyman.
Hi, how are you? So my question is based on what is your strategy, projected strategy, in terms of you obtaining input from stakeholders?
So we've had a very significant stakeholder outreach as we've gone through the development of this feasibility study. Certainly we're going to, and that was a strategy that was commented on and had input on from the county and the city, I believe. Some of that was before I got here, but we would certainly engage with the city and the county in developing the outreach. Right now, it's this high level. We're looking at some big open houses in each of the counties, perhaps 2 in Durham County, and also some online engagement, some webinars, and maybe a survey. But certainly that is something that we need to develop in consultation with the municipal partners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Other questions? I've got some questions.
Sure.
So can you tell me the projections for how many people would be riding the rail? Are those projections taking into consideration the increase in teleworking that we've seen over the last little bit? Also the projections for the traffic congestion over the next few years. I feel like there's been a big change since COVID. I don't know if people think that's going to continue, or are we going to go back to normal, and how are we working that in?
Well, that's true, and it's changing as we speak, right? So, you know, more people are going back to the office than I think we anticipated up to this point. I think it's also reflected in our use of our buses here. I know Durham is almost back to 100% on their ridership, and Go Triangle is like 87% now. I'm going to let Catherine Eggleston speak to that a little bit, but we are also looking at how we schedule the trains and maybe have more all-day service available for folks that have different travel patterns than they had 2 years ago.
So the modeling that we've done so far does not take into account new travel patterns. The data basis is pre-pandemic. So far, the Federal Transit Administration is continuing to accept pre-pandemic, or actually encourage pre-pandemic information to be submitted. However, we're tracking that closely and working with the organizations that do the surveys. Go Triangle participates in regional onboard surveys, as well as contributes to the entity at NC State that maintains the travel demand model for the region. They do regular household origin and destination study work, which does capture those travel pattern changes. So that work is continuing on a regular basis. So as or if the project moves forward, updated estimates will begin to be based on new data following whatever those federal guidelines are about that.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Another question on slide number 5, where you show kind of a close-up view of the corridor, and there's an outline drawn, like the green snake that's going through the region around the corridor. What's the distance that you're using from the rail line to the edges of that image?
It's 1 mile either side of the corridor.
1 mile either side. Okay, great. Thank you. And finally, the closing at Plum Street, I was looking at a map, and I was wondering if that would impact, if closing Plum Street would have any impact on Pettigrew Street, or would the folks that street where Plum Street heads south, if those folks would still be able to come up and go either right or left on Pettigrew Street, or if there would have to be some sort of alternative figured out.
Yeah, so if there were to be a closure of Plum Street, just that piece that's north of Pettigrew across the rail corridor, that wouldn't affect the connectivity of Pettigrew to Plum and then further south.
Okay, so the only issue would be folks wouldn't be able to go north into that, they'd have to go around, but they still could go east or west, like into downtown or?
Correct.
Out toward, okay.
Yeah, and options for mitigating that loss of direct connection to the north could be evaluated in that study that Ellen was just discussing, or as development of the commuter rail station plans would move forward. If there were to be a commuter rail station there, we would envision a pedestrian bridge connection over the rail corridor so that there would be direct access on foot to the station from the north side of the tracks.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, it looks like there's just a few houses there and the green flea market, so limited impact, but we want to make sure that we talk to those folks and figure that out. Thank you. Any other questions from council? Yeah, Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I was just following up and noting, so the direct connection, just trying to get, the direct connection to the north would be cut off, and that would be reviewed in the county. I'm sorry. The other question I had, I think Ms. Beckman mentioned a grade separation at TW Alexander. I didn't catch the cross street, and that was the only, I had a question around that.
So I mentioned that in terms of today, where there's existing grade-separated crossings of the railroad, there's Alston, and then TW Alexander, and everything in between is at grade, except for 885. That's, I guess, the exception, the new East End connector. But all the other streets today, involve crossing the railroad. So that's why I mentioned it.
Okay. And so the current plan is all at grade, is what you're saying? This 4 locations in Durham, they would be at grade? I couldn't catch whether or not you were saying yes.
Okay, so we would, like the study that the county would do would look specifically at Plum, Driver, Briggs, which is in between, which currently does not cross the railroad tracks. But, there's 2 segments of Briggs that aren't connected. And then Ellis near Anger Pettigrew intersection. So we would look at like that area, those 4 crossings, and look at what the impacts would be if we did close or grade separate, and if there would be mitigation that would be needed and appropriate for the community, like bike ped bridges or other facilities. Connectivity of what connectivity would be left, and like what could we improve through a construction project in that area.
Thank you. And just coming back to, I think, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Latuga or Ms. Eggleston that mentioned the ridership, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Did I hear that Go Triangle was at 100%? I know I'm sorry, Go Durham was at 100%, you said?
Yes, Go Durham, I believe, is at 100% of pre-COVID ridership on the buses, which is great news.
Okay. And I'll take that up with staff. But just acknowledging that there are different travel patterns, and the fact that this is not a peak directional service, is there any consideration around not calling it commuter rail and maybe regional rail?
That is...
I think I've raised that question before, just acknowledging hospital patients would probably ride and hospital visitors might ride. And so I think just moving away from commuter more to regional and acknowledging that this is more of a line that connects us across the region might be helpful.
That's right, and I agree with your comment, because we should be just calling it passenger rail, right? Because that's what it is, and commuter is an old-fashioned term, I think, especially with the advent of COVID and the new travel patterns that we're seeing from folks. So I think going forward, we probably could make that change.
And then I would just like to highlight, I noted a few of the concerns that were raised and conversations previously around engagement and supply diversity and a couple of other areas around, dollars and where they went. I think that you've been doing a really good job of trying to nail those down, but I've not had an update, so I would love to hear if you're anticipating doing an update or not, when that would be, and just making sure that I'm on the update email list if that's what's happening.
Thank you, Council Member. Madam Manager, did you want to speak? Go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to bring to the table today that the item that you heard was a presentation. You have heard from us, city staff, about our desire to go after all federal funding for which we are eligible for, which can benefit the community of Durham, North Carolina. You've actually heard members here today speak about the city of Durham writing a letter or issuing a letter of support for the grant that Durham County will be pursuing in the context of the planning and engagement around the stops that were identified here. While this is not an action item, as you know, it's just a presentation. As manager, I would like to see your support or lack thereof of signing that letter of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Would you like us to take a vote, or is just a thumbs up or head nods okay? Nods are okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I might. Madam Manager, thank you so much. And your nudge actually goes to my earlier question. Is our signing on, or would it be reasonable for folk to interpret our signing on to the letter as our indication that the weather has been answered definitively, or is this still kind of, can we still hedge? Her Honor isn't here, hasn't weighed in on the discussion. I know there's some discussion, and Councilmember Freeman has raised some issues that I know that we need to have as a discussion as a council. So is it safe to say that because we give assent or our agreement today to sign the letter to pursue the money, which I agree with the manager, does that mean we are ultimately saying we've answered whether we're going forward? Are the two conflatable, or?
So, I mean, I might let Ellen also weigh in, but Ellen has said that there's a dual purpose here, right? So there's a safety purpose, and then there's a future transit purpose. And I'll just let Ellen weigh in.
I would say no, for sure. I mean, this is one area that needs to be addressed that's been identified in the study. There are other areas that need to be addressed and other problems to be solved and other money to be found.
Absolutely.
So this is biting off one piece at a time to try to get this project done. It's a big project,
right,
and it will take a lot of effort, sustained effort for probably decades.
Right.
Let's be honest here.
And that was precisely my read. I wanted that to be on record, that this is a piece of a specific and not the whole project today. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Caballero, then Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. My thumb was up as well. I just wanted to let colleagues know that this same issue did come before the MPO last week. They would also need a letter of support for this grant from the MPO, and I am one of the council member liaisons, and there was unanimous support at the MPO.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams.
Yep, thank you. I was going to just say that. We have stated our vote at the MPO level to support it. The other thing is, I think this is an opportunity to address this study from, through the lens of equity. I do think that sometimes we take that buzzword and it dilutes it, but this is in fact, a case in which we could, go back and look at that area. If you look at the great separations across the city, it is that East Durham area that really needs some tender love and care, and I think this would allow us to do that. And I also want to say, as we're going through this presentation today, we need to be looking at moving people from point A to point B. And as we continue to have these very complex dialogues around transit and regional rail, which I agree with Councilmember Freeman, I don't want us to get into the habit of thinking that we need to move Black, brown, and poor people. Like, we need to make sure rail is available for people to get from point A to point B. And that's how we build a system for everyone. And that's how we make sure that our folks that are disadvantaged, our folks that are advantaged, and whoever else is collectively helping us get cars off the road and people moving in alternative modes of transportation. So I look forward to the results of this study. And also I think it's on us to really encourage multi-modes of transportation in any project that we have going forward. So rail is just one of those. So just wanted to state that.
And I appreciate that comment. I have not said it yet today, but normally I do say that this is the three-legged stool, right? So it is going to be rail, bus, and BRT. And you don't have a BRT project planned here yet, but Chapel Hill does and Raleigh does right now. I assume that in the future, in the next 5-10 years, Durham is also going to be anticipating a BRT project, and BRT is a great way to move people around. All of these should be complementary to each other and should have a multimodal effort to get people around. So we are focused on building a transit system that's connected and serves everybody. So that's what we're looking at.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I appreciate Councilmember Williams' comment, and I was thinking along those same lines and my thumb sideways, that I want to be really clear that the prioritization cannot shift in a way that makes us less able to handle it. Just acknowledging that we're at 100% in Durham on our bus ridership. That means that we're going to 150 and 200. And so just making sure that that's not lost in that, acknowledging that. I think it's Route 9 that's been brought to our attention repeatedly and still hasn't been addressed. And so, acknowledge the first, public comments that we're hearing today are around Vision Zero. And there are so many children who ride the bus, who are standing on the side of the roads. Like, those are the things that kind of still leave me uncertain, and making sure that our staff understands that even going after federal dollars, knowing that if it's competitive or not, that there is a prioritization that occurs when we shift our focus towards regional, commuter, whatever you call it, when it's rail. So we still need our roads for the buses. We still need our roads for the for the bus rapid transit. And those roads right now, we're moving in a direction where we'll be above 70%, but I don't want to see us stepping backwards. So I want to make sure we continue to move forward as a city. And that's just mainly the points that keep me I'm not sure yet. I still need to see the plan that actually does complement where we are going as a city. And I know that our staff will get there, but I'm still hesitant.
So I appreciate your comments, especially about Route 9, and I heard some about Route 9 when I was walking into the room. I report, well, Catherine does, we report to our board what's going on in Bragtown at just about every meeting since April. And we continue to report on what our efforts are to improve services, improve the bus infrastructure, and make it safer along Route 9. And I know that the city, Sean Egan, is working on a plan to increase the frequency of the bus services out there, which we've been working on that with him too. So yeah, it all starts with the local service, and that you cannot forget as you build out these regional systems.
Thank you. I'll just add one additional comment to that, in that I heard something about well, I saw as well in the presentation, the downtown station being a little bit of a concern. I do want to note that the conversation, I don't know where it stands right now, but it would be good to get an update on where we are on Wellens Village, being that that was kind of the second stop that was the most used, and figuring out what that looks like. And so I do want to hear from staff at some point, what that means and if that's helpful or not in this conversation. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So just for clarity, can we do the thumbs one more time? You got what you need? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
All right, friends, we are at the end of our pulled items. We do have a closed session, but I think should we settle the agenda before we move into closed session? Madam Clerk? Great. Madam Manager, yeah, we're ready.
Thank you very much. Chair Johnson, members, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, I have for you, for your council meeting, consent items 1 through 6 and item 8, and then GBA public hearings items 10 through 13.
Thank you. Is there a motion to settle the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Williams, seconded by Councilmember Freeman. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Passes unanimously 6-0. We will now need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the city to the city attorney's earlier request.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Hyman, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we passes 6-0 unanimously, and we are now in closed session.
Recording stopped.